Welcome to Hometown Happenings. I'm Carol McCarthy here at Tamarac National Wildlife Refuge with Wayne Bruniger. He is a wildlife biologist here at the refuge. And today our topic is going to be about gray wolves and the delisting. And Wayne here is going to tell us a little bit about maybe the history of gray wolves and you know, the delisting, what does that mean, and those sorts of things, and how you're monitoring gray wolves. You have a program right now that you're doing here at Tamarac. You're involved in that, so that'll be the second half today. And Wayne, first off, let's talk a little bit about the gray wolf. Give us a little bit of a history of the gray wolf.
In terms of the history of the gray wolf, the gray wolf was essentially distributed across the United States, with the exception of the southeastern portion of the United States, and on up through Canada. And obviously, with settlement into the landscape, we had a outlook on wolves maybe not so favorable for wolves over the years, and so many of the wolves were extirpated from a lot of the areas, a lot of the different states. And in Minnesota, there was a small remnant population in the northeast part of the state, kind of up in the Boundary Waters area, that was able to maintain several hundred wolves. And essentially through about in the mid-60s, wolves were actually a hunted species in Minnesota, and likewise throughout some of the states, and there was programs for control. And actually the government agencies were part of that control effort, a very aggressive control effort, and it was kind of leading to the demise of the wolf throughout its range. And back about in the early 1970s, 1973, the Endangered Species Act came into play, which put the gray wolf in a protected status at that point in time throughout the contiguous United States.
All right. So what does this mean now that the wolf has been delisted?
Well, again, it's one of those really true success stories, not only for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, but the citizens of the United States in itself. It shows that the Endangered Species Act does work. We have capabilities of bringing species back from near extinction to very high population levels, and obviously in Minnesota, wolves can be quite contentious topic when you talk to different groups, conservation groups. Particularly deer hunters obviously have a favorable, not so favorable outlook on gray wolves sometimes. So.
All right. So what is the wolf deer population ratio right now?
Well, in Minnesota, the way we see it is there's about 175 deer per wolf ratio. That's kind of been done through research studies and population estimates. In Minnesota, we have an estimate of around 3,000 wolves in Minnesota. Population very similar to about 700 in Michigan and about 800 in Wisconsin. And so the delisting process really focused on the Great Lakes distinct population segment, which focuses on Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan as a separate distinct population from the eastern population. And so we were able to essentially say since about 1979, this population has actually been at recovery goal or above. And so under the Endangered Species Act, there was a recovery goal set and established for how many animals we wanted to see in these different areas. And like I said, we've well beyond that recovery goal now since about 1979.
Okay, very good. So right now, are there any wolves in the area, in the Tamarac National Wildlife Refuge, that you're monitoring or that sort of thing right now?
We do. We actually have several wolf packs on the refuge that we know of, and we're doing some low-level baseline monitoring of kind of a demographic study, survival, pack size, territory size. A lot of this information is information that's been well documented in wolf research projects throughout the United States and even Canada and into Alaska, of course. But on the periphery of the range here in Minnesota, not a lot is known. And so that's one of the reasons why we're kind of taking a little bit of look. And with the subsequent delisting, the authority of management goes to the state or tribal agencies for administration of management of that species. So.
All right. And how many different species of wolves are there in Minnesota?
Actually, there's one, and that's why the distinct population comes into play. Genetic research has shown that it's truly a distinct population from the eastern population. So last year, in 2011, when the delisting was initially proposed, they were going to delist wolves across the eastern United States as well. Subsequent to that, now they went back on the endangered species list. A little bit of information was gathered through genetic analysis and scientific expert opinion, and it was determined that the eastern populations of wolves are not genetically similar to the distinct population here we have in the Great Lakes. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, Wayne Brenninger is my guest today on Hometown Happenings. We're talking about the gray wolf, the delisting. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, Wayne's going to tell us a little bit about their monitoring techniques here on Hometown Happenings. Welcome back to Hometown Happenings. I'm Carol McCarthy here with Wayne Brenninger at the Tamarac National Wildlife Refuge, and he is a wildlife biologist. We're talking about gray wolves, and Wayne, just a little bit of a distinction here. You know, people hear about timber wolves. Of course, they're our basketball team here in Minnesota, but people do refer to some of the wolves as timber wolves. Are they in fact gray wolves?
Timber wolves are, yes, in fact, gray wolves. Pretty common for a slang term that used by the general public for the most part. The correct terminology would be a gray wolf, okay. Is how they're referred to, but they're one and the same. Oftentimes you'll hear words like a brush wolf used to, and a brush wolf is simply a coyote, is what people are referring to. Okay. And so they're two distinct species.
All right, very good. Well, Wayne's going to show us some of the monitoring equipment they use. They are involved in a monitoring program with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, monitoring gray wolves. And tell us a little bit about how you would go about that.
Well, we basically started this monitoring effort in advance of the delisting for several reasons. One of the primary reasons is to obviously to establish some baseline information and what we know about pack size and how they're impacted on the refuge as well as off the refuge. So we started that by simply doing some low-lying baseline telemetry work, observations in the field through radio marked wolves. And we have several ways of doing it, but we can essentially capture a wolf and radio mark it and then come back and monitor it in the field. And we have two ways of doing that. We have two radio types that we use, the conventional VHF radio telemetry, where we actually go out in the field and collect the data. We triangulate on where the wolf is at, and then we come back in here in the office and try to figure out exactly where that was position-wise and come up with some coordinates. And we also, through that technique, we're able to get visual observations on the wolves and look at their condition and their pack size and so forth. Mm-hmm. We also have satellite telemetry that we're utilizing, which it's a simplified means. It's a little bit more costly to utilize, but we essentially can receive coordinates right at our desk on a timely basis, and so we can have essentially up-to-date information on where that wolf is distributed on a daily basis.
Okay, so you have collars, you attach collars to these wolves, and how does that work?
Yes, we do. So essentially what we do is we go out in the field. We actually have to capture a wolf, and one might think capturing a wolf is a fairly easy process, but it is not, I can assure you. We spend numerous hours trying to catch these wolves in cooperation with some state wolf experts. And this is one of the wolves we use, our radios that we use in the field. And once we capture it, we properly fit it to the neck size of the wolf and allow some room for growth. If it's not an adult wolf, we'll have to allow a little bit of room for growth. And this part on the bottom is essentially the radio package, and the rest of it's the collar. Inside this collar is the antenna, and that's how the signal is received. It's transmitted through a satellite and back down to Earth. And we have a receiver that we hook an antenna to, and we can actually hear the signal. And I'll just flip it on real quick so you can hear a beat. And we also have mortality sensors within these, so we are able to tell if the wolf is presumably dead. So then we can go in and do further investigations.
Mm-hmm. And you have a way also to detach the collar too.
Yes, some of these come with a variety of techniques to detach. This is the satellite radio. It's programmed to collect data up to a certain period of time, and then the radio will actually self-release, it's called, and it'll be a timed release, and we can go out in the field and recollect this radio, send it in and have it refurbished and put it out again.
All right. Well, Wayne, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for the work that you do. It's interesting to kind of go behind the scenes and explain a little bit more about the delisting of the gray wolf. I'm here at Tamarac National Wildlife Refuge with Wayne Brenninger, and he's a wildlife biologist here, and thanks for tuning in for Hometown Happenings. I'm Carol McCarthy.